Okay, let's dive into this explainer. I want you to imagine a scenario that, well, let's be honest, most of us are way too familiar with. Picture this. You're sitting in a meeting, or maybe you're just grabbing coffee with an acquaintance, and bam, someone interrupts you right in the middle of a sentence. Or maybe they kind of talk down to you, as if your opinions simply don't matter at all. They might even mock your kindness, totally ignore your boundaries, or just treat you like you're somehow beneath them. It's a completely visceral experience, isn't it? You can almost feel it just thinking about it right now. For a split second, something inside you shifts. The temperature in the room seems to drop, and that social dynamic, it is instantly fractured.
And here is exactly what happens physically in that moment. Your heart actually starts beating faster. Your palms might get a little sweaty. And your mind, it instantly starts replaying the interaction on a continuous, exhausting loop. Hours later, maybe even days later, you're still thinking about it. Lying awake in bed at 2 a.m., imagining all the brilliant things you should have said, all the clever ways you should have defended yourself. But here is the strange underlying truth that psychology reveals to us. Most people think disrespect hurts because of the literal words the other person said. But the real pain, that agonizing pit in your stomach, that actually comes from what the disrespect makes us believe about our own identity. It doesn't just challenge our patience for rude behavior. It fundamentally challenges our entire sense of self.
And it forces us to ask this incredibly painful question. Am I really worth the respect I want from others? Oof, it's a heavy question, right? So today, we're going to unpack the science and the psychology behind all of this. We're going to uncover exactly why disrespect affects us so deeply in our nervous system, why some people constantly seem to attract it, and why others, well, they just command respect without saying much at all. And most importantly, by the end of this explainer, we're going to look at how you can respond to disrespect in a way that protects your dignity without completely destroying your peace of mind. Because sometimes the absolute strongest response isn't the loudest one, it's the one that completely shifts how you see yourself.
All right, let's start with part 1. Why disrespect hurts so much.
I want you to imagine two different people hearing the exact same insult. Literally the same words, same tone, same environment. Person A shrugs it off, laughs, and completely forgets about it within 5 minutes. Person B, on the other hand, obsesses over it for 3 solid weeks. So why does this happen? The answer actually isn't in the insult itself, it's in the meaning that the individual person attaches to it. To really understand this, we have to look at how we're wired. Human beings are deeply, fundamentally social creatures. For thousands of years of our evolutionary history, belonging to a group quite literally meant survival. I mean, if you were rejected by your tribe, it could mean death. You couldn't just survive alone in the wilderness. And although our modern world has completely changed, your brain hasn't entirely caught up to that fact. Deep inside your nervous system, disrespect can still feel like a literal physical threat to your safety. This leads us to something called social wounds. This is exactly why criticism, humiliation, and rejection activate some of the exact same brain regions that are associated with actual physical pain. Your brain, biologically, often interprets social wounds as real physical wounds. Crazy, right?
So the absolutely crucial point here is, when a single disrespectful comment completely ruins an otherwise perfect day for you, you need to understand this. It is not weakness. It's biology. It's literally just your brain trying to keep you safe. However, there is a catch. The people who suffer the absolute most from disrespect are actually not the quote-unquote weakest people. They're often the people who secretly depend on external validation to feel good about themselves. Think about it. When your self-worth depends entirely on how others treat you, every single disrespectful interaction feels like a definitive verdict on your overall value. Every rude comment becomes hard evidence. Every tiny rejection becomes proof that you just aren't enough. And suddenly, you've basically handed another person the remote control to your emotional state. That is a really dangerous place to live, because the truth is, there will always be disrespectful people in the world. The real question we have to answer is whether you're going to give them power over your mind.
That brings us to part 2, why some people disrespect others.
Let's shift our paradigm here and put the spotlight on the aggressor for a moment. Most people naturally assume that when someone is disrespectful, arrogant, or rude, it comes from a place of overwhelming confidence. We tend to think, wow, they must really think highly of themselves. But in reality, psychology tells us it's the exact opposite. It very often stems from deep-seated insecurity. Think about it logically for a second. Truly secure people do not usually feel the need to belittle others. People who genuinely feel valuable rarely, if ever, spend their precious time trying to make someone else feel worthless. Disrespectful individuals are actually fighting invisible battles behind closed doors. They feel powerless, they feel inadequate, and they feel completely unseen by the world. And instead of looking inward and dealing with those highly uncomfortable emotions, what do?
They push them outward, right onto you.
And this brilliantly illustrates a clinical concept known as psychological projection. That's the act of placing your own internal discomfort, fears, or self-criticism onto someone else. Let me give you an example. The person who is constantly criticizing everyone around them, they are very likely secretly criticizing themselves all day long. The person who humiliates others, they secretly live in total terror of being humiliated themselves. The person who acts completely superior, yep, you guessed it, they secretly feel incredibly inferior. Now, I want to be super clear here. Understanding this does not excuse their disrespect. Bad behavior is still bad behavior, for sure. But understanding this dynamic, it literally changes everything for you. Because when you realize that another person's disrespectful behavior often reveals vastly more about them than it does about you, well, their words begin to lose their grip on your mind. You stop taking every single insult so personally. You stop carrying emotional burdens that were never yours to carry in the first place. And my friends, that realization is the very beginning of true emotional freedom.
Now we reach part 3, the biggest mistake people make.
So we've talked about why it hurts and why people do it, but how do we actually react? When disrespected, most people instinctively fall into one of two extreme traps. On one side, some people respond by exploding with pure anger. They argue, they attack back, they try to quote-unquote win the interaction and dominate the other person. On the other side, other people default to collapsing, just staying totally silent. They suppress their hurt feelings, they awkwardly smile through it, and they tolerate behavior that slowly but surely destroys their self-respect. Both of these extreme responses create massive problems. If you explode, you sacrifice your peace. You become chaotic. But if you collapse, you sacrifice your dignity. You basically become a doormat.
Let's move to and see how this builds into our ultimate middle path solution. Assertiveness. Assertiveness is absolutely not aggression. It is not yelling, and it is certainly not trying to establish dominance over someone. It's simply communicating your inherent value without feeling the frantic need to prove it to anyone. It's about calmly establishing boundaries. You see, an aggressive person might yell, "You better respect me right now." But an assertive person? They handle it entirely differently.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the profound power in this one simple sentence. I don't accept being spoken to that way. Notice the incredible difference here. The aggressive response seeks to control the other person's behavior, but this assertive script, it simply establishes a firm boundary around your own space. And boundaries, ultimately, are where respect begins. We really have to remember that people generally treat us according to the standards we consistently enforce. If you repeatedly tolerate disrespect, people will simply assume it's acceptable. Not because you deserve to be treated poorly, you definitely don't, but simply because human behavior naturally adapts to whatever it can get away with. The moment you calmly, firmly establish your limits, the entire dynamic starts to change.
Which leaves us with this final, vital question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. What boundaries will you establish today to protect your dignity and your peace? Remember, you don't have to be loud to be strong. You just have to be clear about your worth and refuse to accept anything less. Stop tolerating the unacceptable, recognize the biology and psychology at play, and start enforcing your worth today. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this, and I really hope you take these tools and apply them the very next time someone crosses the line.